part of the Oral History Project. It's an interview of Coach Marvin Rippy. It's being done on November 23rd, 1994 in AX13. I'm Carol Pohl and I teach sociology at FIT. Okay, what I'd like to do is just for you to give us your name, what position you have now, and just trace the jobs you've had at FIT. First, your name and how many years you've worked at FIT.
Okay, my name is Marvin Rippy. I've been at FIT for approximately 23 years. I'm currently classroom technologist, basketball coach, recreation supervisor. I've taught some classes here. I've done a lot of things here at FIT over the years.
Okay, and I think you were a student. Were you a student
Yes,
here?
I'm a former student. I graduated in 1969 with an associate's degree in Textile Administration and Sales.
Okay, if you could talk a little about the early days, what you remember, both as a student, I guess, and as a...
Well, 1967, I entered FIT as a student. I remember FIT being a lot smaller than it is today. As a matter of fact, FIT consisted of the C building and I think it was one dorm at the time. And everything was in the C building, all the classrooms, the activities and everything. And it just seemed like you knew everybody at FIT years ago, and everyone knew you. Today, FIT being what it is and seeing how it's grown over the years, sometimes you're a little out of touch with certain departments or people. It's changed drastically over the years. But I guess like any good institution or any good organization, with time you must grow, you know.
And what was your major here at FIT?
Textile Administration and Sales.
And you expected to go into that and then...
Well, at the time I came in, I thought that perhaps that's what I wanted to be involved with. But once I got in, I saw some other opportunities, and I changed my mind. And my first love was always physical education, I think deep down inside. But I think someone convinced me to try Textile Administration and Sales. But I'm sort of glad the way things went, ultimately.
Was there a basketball team then?
Yes, there was a team. As a matter of fact, the team was, I think Raoul Nacinovich had formed a team a few years before I got there. And I recall my first year playing basketball here at FIT. We were the first team to win 20 plus games and conference championship and that type of thing, and it was a lot of fun. Raoul was the coach at the time, and it was a great experience. It was really a lot of fun.
Did you come here because there was a basketball team?
Not per se. I mean, that was one of the reasons I enjoyed sports, and I'm glad they had a basketball team in sports. But no, that wasn't the main reason.
Could you talk a little about your work with the basketball team, when you started working with the basketball team?
Well, in 1971, Raoul offered me a position as assistant coach, and for a couple of years I was assistant coach. In 74 season, I came on as head coach, and ever since then I've been trying to take the program in a certain direction. You know, it's funny how you see the progress of something, how you see it develop and materialize. I remember my first year as head coach going to games, and everybody was sort of feasting on us, you know, beating us up, and you would hear things like send the basket weavers home, and they must be tailor making their offense, knit one, purl two, and I mean, it was very humiliating, you know, to go and get beat by 60 points and that type of thing. So at the end of the season, I had some hard choices to make. I said, if I'm going to stay involved with the basketball, I'm never going to be this this non-competitive. So we went out and did some recruiting, and the following year we turned the program around. We were 24. We were 4-22 the first year. That year that everybody humiliated us, and then the following year we were 22-5, and we gained some instant respect. ever since then, the program has been constantly growing, and the kids have been moving on to various programs from our program.
When you say 22 and 5, you won 22
We won
games?
22 games and lost 5.
And how did you turn the program around?
Well, it was a lot of hard work, just getting out, talking to people, trying to convince them that coming to FIT might be a good opportunity for them to get an education, and also to create other opportunities to go on through athletics for more education and more athletics. And a lot of the young people were looking at the time for opportunities, and a lot of them listened to what I had to say. So it was just a matter of just presenting an opportunity for them.
Where do you go to recruit?
Local high schools.
New York City?
Basically New York City area. I mean, on occasion we do get young men from the tri-state area, but it's predominantly inner city kids.
And do you have connections, I guess, with the phys ed? You hear about who are good players?
Well, you know, it's like anything. If you stay in something long enough, you sort of get it down to a science, and you do network and develop relationships with people who call you and give you leads. And it's still a lot of phone work, a lot of actual going out and contacting and shaking hands. It's a lot of footwork. But we have, over the years, we've developed a very good staff here with the program, and the staff gets out and does a lot of the legwork, and makes life a lot easier in terms of recruiting.
Who are the staff? What do you mean staff?
Well, assistant coaches, Fred Neal, Paul Johnson, Bob Bear, Shannon Poland are currently working with us, helping me at the games, prepare for the games, talking to individuals. The program has grown from a local program to a national program. We're nationally recognized. We've been in the top 20 junior colleges the last 10 out of 15 years. Out of 2,000 junior colleges in the United States, we've been fortunate enough to be in the top 20 quite a few years, and we're recognized nationally at this point. And when the program grows like that, obviously you need some good people helping you to maintain that. So I've been blessed in that I have a good AD in Raoul who believes in what we're doing, and I have some really good people in the program that give us the energy and the time and help me get things done. My first year coaching that I referred to earlier, I wore all of those hats. I didn't have an assistant coach, and I was the coach, the scout, the interviewer. I did everything, but it's just gotten to a point now where I can't do it by myself. I have to rely on some good people.
And most of the students that come for the program are going to continue for the BA here, or?
Well, on occasion I get young men who go up a division, but the majority of them come in looking to create scholarship opportunities. For example, I had one young man who got drafted by the Knicks. His name was Richie Pass. He graduated from here, went to Monmouth College, which is a Division I college in Jersey, led the state of Jersey in scoring, and the Knicks drafted him. He wound up in law school, but it was a great opportunity. And another young man who played for me 2 years here, and San Diego State came in and gave him a full scholarship. And over the years, I've had many individuals come in and go to various senior colleges and universities and get all expenses paid for 3 years. You know, room, board, scholarship, and that type of thing. So a lot of them come through looking for opportunity to develop their skills, to get an education on this level, and to move to another level. And a lot of them are successful at doing that.
Do we give them scholarships here to come?
No, here, we don't give out a scholarship. We're basically financial aid based on need, and most of the kids, being inner city kids, qualify for EOP or financial aid. And being we're a state school and in New York State residents, it really isn't a tremendous sum of money, but a lot of their financial needs are met through financial aid.
And what kind of majors do they tend to go into?
Most of the business majors, the communications, occasionally management, merchandising, marketing. I do get some art majors, illustration, that type of thing, but the majority of them are business majors. Some come in and want to just take liberal arts, just so they can apply it to other things when they move on to other schools.
And how do you keep up with their grades, check on their grades? And
Well, we've developed a system here where once a month we send out evaluation forms. I'm pretty sure you may have received some of them. And we ask the instructors basic things about the individual, whether or not they're showing up and how they're participating, what their grade scores are. And it sort of helps us track the individual, and it keeps a line of communication open between myself, the instructor, and the parent. I do speak with the parents about their progress. So that's really helped us keep the kids motivated because they know that we're somewhat checking on them.
And when you say they're mostly inner city kids, what do you mean? Mostly African Americans, or from mostly Latino, mostly working class backgrounds? Or?
Well, the community college, sports on the community college level in New York City and places like New York City are predominantly quote-unquote minority kids, and a large number of them happen to be African American, although it's a whole mixed bag of kids, every ethnic background I've had. But I think due to the cost of an education today and the availability of certain things, you find that you do get a lot of African American young men coming in, and people that can't afford to go to some of the private larger institutions. So we do get a large number, and that's not just FIT. That's basically all the community colleges if you look today.
Has that changed since the 70s? Have you noticed any change in that?
Yes, in general, student population in general. When I was in school, there was, to a lesser degree, the number of African Americans or minority students. I see greater numbers today. I think obviously because of the economics and the availability, but it's changed over the years. It has. I think America has changed over the years in general, and I think the colleges, especially on this level, are reflecting a lot of that change.
Do you do work besides the basketball team? Do you say you teach courses at all?
Well, when I first came in, basketball, bowling, and a few other activities. Now I'm basically involved in recreation, the basketball, and I'm also the classroom technologist for the department, and I also teach weight training. That's part of my job, is being classroom technologist, weight training.
What does that mean?
Well, we have a lot of gymnastics and aerobics classes and that type of thing, and we do the team teaching. We segment certain parts, and they'll send their group to me for weight training, and I'll basically take them in and do circuit training and individual training and that type of thing with the classes.
Both male and females do weight training?
Yes. We're a co-ed weight room.
And that's true of all the other subjects, I guess not the basketball team, but...
Well, not the basketball team, but all the other phys ed courses are co-ed courses. We just haven't had enough interest over the years in a girls' team. I think the young ladies here are more into the fashion and perhaps making themselves up and doing nails and that type of thing and making fashions as opposed to the sports. I think it's one of the reasons we never had a serious effort to get a girls' team here.
All right, when you think about changes, can you think of some other changes you've noticed at FIT?
Well, yes. I've seen people come and go. Going just back to when I had mentioned the college was a lot smaller and everything was basically in a C building. It just seemed as though the relationships between people were a lot closer, a lot more personal. Now, for some reason, I don't know, it just seems very, very impersonal at this point in a lot of different areas. Maybe because we've grown so large, it's hard to have that personal situation. But yes, there have been changes. I think in terms of support, just how the college would sort of support the activities has tremendously changed. Everyone seems to be coming in, doing a job, and going back home, and not putting in maybe a couple extra hours to give back to the students. And I don't know, I can't put my finger on it exactly, but that support from the general community doesn't seem to be there.
How is the basketball team funded?
Well, it's funded through student activities. There's a budget allotted for all the teams, and the basketball team just is one of the entities and shares the general funding for athletics. You know, there's no special fund or anything for the basketball team. It's the same way the tennis or the bowling or team would be funded through the general athletic fund.
Is that true in most colleges?
Well, you know, if you have most major universities that have large teams and give out scholarships and that type of thing, a lot of them generate a lot of revenue through their teams. As a matter of fact, there are schools through athletics. Athletics actually runs the school. You know, you get major schools like Indiana, Georgetown, where these schools generate tremendous revenues from their football and basketball programs and that type of thing.
How do they generate the money?
Well, they charge for their home games. They have big arenas, and there are all kinds of monies that I guess donated and that type of thing. There are a lot of different ways that they get their money. TV time, when you see them play on television, there's contracts that someone has to pay them for and that type of thing. But they generate a tremendous amount of revenue and basically run a lot of the things in those colleges that you see through the athletics.
Do we charge for the facility?
No, this is a state school, part of SUNY, a whole different concept. You know, this is a community college, a smaller setting. It's not a major situation where you have millions of dollars per each year coming through. No, it's totally different. You know.
Have you kept in contact with the basketball players that have been here at your team?
Yes, we have an annual alumni game each year, beginning of the season, and we extend an invitation to all of our alumni to come back and participate in one form or another. Some of them at this point obviously don't play anymore, but when they come back and talk to the young men that are in the program about what it was like when they were students and athletes and what the real world is about, and also networking, because a lot of the alumni are in business and doing things now, and they offer advice and also job opportunities for a lot of the young men. So it's sort of a fun event each year. It's well attended, and it's a way that we sort of keep in touch with the alumni.
Okay. Can you think of some things that you would like to make sure go into the history of FIT, the archives, in terms of your experiences here? Or?
That's a tough one. Something that
basketball team things that events.
Well, we've had some great situations here. The first regional championship that the college ever won was back in the early '80s, and that team had an opportunity to go to Hutchinson, Kansas for the national tournament. It will be something I'll always remember. You know, it was the school really coming together and supporting the team, and it was just a great feeling. I see a lot of those young men during an alumni game. They come back and they reflect on it, and it just brings really good feelings back, you know. And I think that particular season set the tempo for what we have today. We've won numerous championships, conference and regional championships since then, and I would like to think of that as being the turning point in FIT athletics, in particular the basketball program, for us setting that cornerstone for becoming a national program.
And that was when?
That was the 80-81 season.
How much do you, where do the teams go to? You mentioned Kansas.
Yes, Hutchinson, Kansas. We wind up with the best 16 teams in the country out there,
Do,
and it's
do
a
you go
great
there,
honor.
often go there?
Well, we've been in the first round of the national tournament quite a few times since then, but actually out in the national tournament we've been there one time, and that's one of our goals each year. This current team has the potential to go out. Last year we won a regional championship and went to the national tournament and lost a very close game and didn't make it out. We were one game away. We've been in that situation quite a few times since the early 80s when we went. But I think this year the team has the potential to get there.
Where are some of the places you travel with the team to?
Oh, Arizona, California, Georgia, Florida, Baltimore area. We've been around the country pretty good, you know.
Probably often the first time the students have been to these
Yes,
places.
we've had situations where it's been the first time a young man has boarded a plane. We were last year. We were in Idaho, and we flew into Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which was an experience. And I mean, it was just, you should see some of the kids' faces when they're boarding the plane. They're actually in flight. It's a great experience for a lot of these kids, you know, to get away from home and see how other folks are living in other parts of the country. You know, they come back with I think, a very positive attitude about I can achieve, and there's something else out there other than my immediate neighborhood, you know.
And you go there to play. Do you have a chance to tour at all when you're there?
Yes, on occasion we get some time where we can, for example, in Georgia, we were down at the Martin Luther King Shrine. California, they were out in Disney World. In Arizona, we got a chance to go out to the desert and see what the desert, you know, you always hear about the desert and what, you know, so we do get an opportunity when it's educational as well as the athletics. I mean, for me also, it's a great experience meeting people and getting to see new things.
All right, we've covered a lot of area. Do you want to mention anything about linkages to government, other government agencies, or
In terms of
like the other SUNY schools? Do we have any special relationships with them? I guess, you know, through the basketball. Well, you have a lot of linkages through this intercollegiate.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, that would basically be my experience with the linkages. It's basically through the athletics and that type of thing. Yeah.
Politicians, have they come to see any of the games? Any political figures?
Well, Mayor Dinkins was in the area at one point when he was in office. When we won that championship that I referred to early in the 80s, there was a proclamation by the New York State Legislature that proclaimed FIT Day and so forth, and it was a thrill. It really was nice. But no, we try to keep the athletics as much as we can non-political. You know, we just enjoy watching a young man come in and after 2 years leave with his degree and leave with a couple of opportunities to go on to further athletics and academics. That's the gratification that we get down here.
What kind of a retention rate do you have in terms of students? Do they tend to stay through the 2 years?
Yes, they do. These kids are highly motivated to participate in sports, and I think we offer them an opportunity for them to develop their skills, and at the same time we structure it, try to get them to be better students. And the majority of our young men stay for the 2 years. Very few leave prior to the 2 years.
Any comments you want to make about the role of the union? Has the union affected this, or any unions outside unions?
No, I would like to say these young men, I respect them a lot as people. I can understand what they're going through as student athletes. Many of them hold jobs, come to school full-time, try to participate in basketball full-time, and then try to have a social life and manage to succeed in all of these areas. And it's not an easy thing to do. Some of them come through, they have children, and they have to provide for their families and manage to make it through and go on and get an education and do something with themselves. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them for that. It takes discipline, a lot of hard work, and it's not easy. I would like to see the college go back to the days when there was more support by the administration, by the students. I think the young men representing FIT and working very hard and being successful at it at least deserve that. There were games and events where we would get tremendous faculty participation. I just don't see that anymore. I guess maybe in the 90s, lifestyles have changed and everybody sort of does their job and goes off into their own experience. But I think these young men are working very hard and doing some positive things. When you read about all the negative things that are occurring out here and you get an opportunity to see young men doing positive things, I think that should be applauded and I think it should be supported. And I don't see enough of that. That would be the one comment that I would make that I would like to see. I would like to see more support in that area.
You mentioned something about them working. Years ago, did you find them working also and being, having jobs as well as going to school, the team, the athletes?
Well, young men throughout the years I've been here have worked. There's always a need to work. But I find, young men now, today in particular, in need of financing or funding, even more so than in the past. I guess it's just a sign of the times where everything is being cut and there are limited resources and that type of thing. It's tough when a young man comes in and he hasn't eaten all day long and he just has enough money for car fare. And you're asking him to come and perform at his maximum level, both in the classroom and on the playing field. It's very tough when you don't have anything in your stomach. And some of these young men, we managed to work things out with them in terms of getting jobs here in maybe food services or the bookstore or in the surrounding area, just so they'll have a little pocket change. I would just love to see the college create a couple of scholarships that we could give to deserving young men who we could screen and we think have the potential to do something with themselves. I'd love to see the college do something like that.
All right, we're winding down on the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your experiences at FIT or the history of FIT?
Well, I guess I pretty much summed up my experience. I met a lot of great people in the experience, both here at FIT and away. If I could change some things, obviously I've touched on a few things I'd like to see, but I'm just happy to have had an opportunity to work with some of the young people that I've worked with and meet some of the people that I've met. And I just hope that God just gives me a little more time because I enjoy what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
It was great.
Great?
It was great, yes, I'm telling you, I think it was great. I learned a lot, I'll tell you. I have all these kids in my classes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, who was talking? That's Marcos, I think, isn't it?
Marcos, yeah.
Yeah, I think he gave me his paper. It's interesting. I should ask him if I can share it with you. Because it's a sociology paper. And what he said is, he used to hang out with the raw kids until he came into the basketball team and working in sports. And now he doesn't hang out with these guys that are into drinking and trouble. I'm telling you.
Well, this is the gratification that I get because a lot of the kids that we have are like Marcos. I get them from different experiences, but a lot of the kids in the neighborhoods have changed tremendously. You don't have to look for trouble. Trouble will find you. And a lot of these kids, this is sort of a safe haven. They'll come here in the morning and leave at 10, 11 o'clock in the evening. And during that time, you're here in an environment where they're structured in terms of going to class, study hall. We have a study hall from 2 to 4 that they have to come to.
Yeah, you should put that on the team. Well, all right.
You know, and we have basketball practice and so forth. And they're here learning something in an environment where they're gonna get something, and it'll equip them to move on into other areas. So I mean, I get a lot of Marcuses, you know, coming through, and a lot of people don't realize what these young men have to go through over a 2-year period to try to make it through. You know, I get calls, Coach, I can't come in today because I don't have coffee. You know, so we desperately try to get that individual some type of job where he can at least get lunch money and coffee. You know, it's a reality. I have one young man right now who lives with the grandmother. The mother has some problems, and the grandmother is about to put him out because has a rough enough time trying to support herself. She's not working, and he has certain needs, and she has certain needs, and he's sort of caught up. And he's a pretty good student, pretty good athlete, but we have to try to sit down and work something out to help him get here each day. These are the little things that we deal with, magnified 15 times sometimes, you know. But it's gratifying to see that after 2 years, the individual finds a way, with our help maybe, make it through and come back as an alumni and bring his family down and say, these are my kids, and this is my wife, and I'm working for such and such, or I'm a policeman now. And it's just a great feeling. And to have him turn around and address the other young men coming through the program and to say, you can make it, you know, if you just stay positive and you work at it. I mean, it's worth your weight in gold. It really is.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, you know. Are you taping? Oh, okay. Well,
Will you stop?
yeah, well, I just said I have 3 guys in my class now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always have students. But it's interesting, and it just came out in his writing, and it wasn't because I was, the great influence of the team. It's changed his life. He could be, it's an article about the Saints and the Roughnecks, kids that can become the Roughnecks and the thugs.
Yeah.
And he turns him around.
Yeah, I mean, I shared the experience because I used to have to run home from school. In the morning, I had to run to school, and after school, I had to run from school, you know, because of the gang situation in a tough neighborhood. And I know what a lot of these kids are going through, you know. But someone took the time. I mean, I was very fortunate. I had a very loving mother and father that kind of kept the lid on things. And my father had certain rules and regulations that, he didn't want broken. And I adhered to that. And I was lucky in the community. There's the positive and negative element. And a lot of the kids don't have money, and they'll look for something quick and move toward the negative element. And I was just one of the lucky ones that had that. My father was the voice of reason for me, and that sort of pushed me into the positive element in the community. And it was sports. That was my outlet, you know. So a lot of these kids today don't have that outlet, you know. But the ones that come here, we at least try to create something that show them a little bit of hope at the end, you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
And,
Thank you, Mr. Gaynor.